Okay, I will start. So I'm Simran Rai, and I'm going to be talking to you a bit today about the Bank of England. I'm here with Steve Sprange, who also works at the bank with me. So we're going to be going. And we're going to be going over how we got into the bank, a little bit about what the bank does and our roles. So I'm going to start you off, and then I'm going to hand over to Steve afterwards. So without further ado, let me start off. So again, I'm Simran Rai. I work as a technical analyst at the Bank of England. I'm currently on the technology grad program. I'm going to talk to you a bit about my journey to get to the bank, what the bank does, and my role. And throughout that, I'm going to try and give you some tips, and I'm going to tell you some of the things that I wish I had done differently. So let's start off with my journey. Starting off from where you guys are now, I did my A-levels in maths, biology, and chemistry. I then did my degree at UCL in human genetics, and then I moved on to the Bank of England last September. So of course, this is quite high level, and there are lots of things I did within and between all of these. So I'm going to be taking you through that now. So I did my degree in biomedical sciences. I liked biology, I liked human biology, but I knew I didn't want to be a doctor, so I went for biomedical sciences. And at the end of my biomedical sciences year, I specialised in human genetics. So between my first and second year at uni, you have a really big, long summer holiday. And one of the first things that I wish I'd done differently is to do an internship during that period. I didn't really think about doing an internship during my first year, and by the time I was thinking about it, it was too late to apply. So that is one of the things I wish I'd done differently. I would have done a first year internship, and I highly suggest that when you guys come to it, you look to apply to those. But if you're like me and you didn't do an internship or you didn't get an internship, that's not the end of the world. And there are lots of other things that you can do throughout your degree to gain some of those key skills as well. So in my second year, I was doing my human genetics, and alongside that, as part of my extracurriculars, I was part of the German Summit Committee. So this is where we organise a 3-day event inviting external speakers to come and talk about Anglo-German relations. So some of the key skills I picked up here was working in a team, organising an event and the theme, learning to budget and research and contact speakers. For my third year of uni, I went abroad to the University of Sydney, which was great. But because of that, I only had 1 month between the end of my second year and the start of my third year because our terms are a bit different. So I managed to get a 1-week internship at Nationwide in the Treasury Department. So I briefly learned about the Treasury Department and what Nationwide does as a whole. So that was really good. And then again, in my third year, I wanted to pick up some skills. So I acted as a class representative, surveying the class and reporting back to the senior lecturers and the course leads, and especially during their end of year review. So I reported back. And then for my last year, I went back to London to do my master's year, and I did an extended research project for my master's year. So I would highly recommend, if you have the chance to do an extended research project, to do that. It meant that I spent most of my time in the lab, and the lab environment is a proper working environment. It's people's jobs as well as students. So you do get to learn how to work in a real working environment. And in addition, because you're doing a massive project, you get to learn how to do some really good research skills, how to communicate your project effectively, and how to communicate to different types of people. So that would be lecturers, but also the students as well. So that was my university life. And then afterwards, I had to decide what was next. So I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do after uni. I hadn't really thought too much about it during uni. So I needed to take some time and think about what I wanted to do. So my plan was to apply to jobs, some PhDs, and work a job while I was doing that. And then once all applications had gone through, my plan was to do some traveling before I started my grad job. But obviously COVID-19 happened. So I went back to that job for the lockdown and started in September. So the main key points I want to take away from this slide are I went from a science role to a technology role. So I think one of the key things is it doesn't really matter what you do in uni. Obviously, if you want to be an astronaut, you should probably do a physics degree. But if you want to go into something more general, then it doesn't make too much of a difference what you do in university, as long as you're picking up those key skills. And also, it's okay to change and decide to do something different. So going from science to technology, for example. And also, it's okay not to know what you want to do and to take some time out to think about it. So within school and within uni, you've got people telling you what you should be doing, or there's somewhat of a set path available. But once you leave, there's nobody telling you what to do, and there's no path. So you have to kind of figure it out. So it's okay to not be sure what you're doing and to take some time out to figure that out. So back to the bank. So I started in September 2020. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what the bank does. We are a central bank, so we're the central bank of the UK. This means we're very different from a commercial bank. We don't give loans, we don't have mortgages, we don't have credit cards, but we do some other stuff. So we print banknotes, and we have the new £50 note coming out, the Alan Turing note, in the next couple of months. So look out for that. And we also set interest rates. So interest rates are currently at an all-time low because of the pandemic, so it's at 0.1%. And you might be asking me, what is an interest rate? What does it mean to me? So an interest rate is the amount of money it costs commercial banks to loan money from the Bank of England. And this will directly affect the rates of mortgages, loans, and savings across the UK. So in addition to that, we also keep the financial system safe and sound. So we have a authority within the bank called the Prudential Regulation Authority, and this authority helps to regulate and supervise all major banks, building societies, credit unions, insurers, and investment firms in the UK. So really helping to keep the financial system safe and sound. So that's what the bank does. And what do I do in the bank? Well, I'm on the technology graduate scheme. So my scheme is rotational. A lot of the schemes in the bank aren't rotational, but I was lucky enough to get on a rotational one. So I started off in the digital workplace, and the digital workplace, it provides the tools for the bank to do all of its work. So all of the technology tools that the bank will need, the digital workplace is in charge of providing those. And as part of my role there, the bank is currently undergoing an Upgrade Bank of England project where we're introducing new systems into the bank. And one of the systems we're introducing is Microsoft Teams. So some of you might use Microsoft Teams at college or school. But for those of you who don't know what it is, it's very similar to Zoom. It's a video chat technology, but it also has instant messaging, and you can share files as well on that. So I was helping to introduce that. So I was writing user guidance, doing demos, and providing support to users. So that was up until last month, and then I changed to problem management at the start of this month. And in problem management, we help identify, diagnose, manage, minimize the effects of, and resolve problems. So what is an IT problem? An IT problem could be something that's small but consistent, or very big. So for example, a very basic problem might be that a printer turns off or breaks down every day. And then we would help to resolve that. Or a very big problem might be that our email systems crash, and that would also be something that we would help to resolve. So that's what I do in my role, but what do I do outside of my role? There are lots of things to do outside of your role in the bank. I'm currently doing the central banking qualification, which is part of the grad scheme. So the bank's really good at helping you do extra stuff outside of your career path. Or outside of the bank. So the central banking qualification is run by Warwick Business School, and you can go all the way up to a master's with that. Or after this first year, I might decide to change. So I also applied to do a data science master's instead of carrying on that qualification. Additionally, in the bank, we have lots of networks, and we have LGBTQ networks, disability networks, for example. So I'm part of the Disability Network, the Green Champions Network, and the Digital Ninjas Network, and I'm also part of the Positive People for our department. So there's lots of stuff and networks outside of the role, and these are a great way to do something that you don't normally do in your role. So for example, the Digital Ninjas run technology campaigns, and I help to do some of the artwork for the posters. So it's a really good way to dip your toes in other places and showcase your other skills that you don't get to show in your other roles. So that's what I do, but what do the other grads do? So I'm going to show you a couple of grads in the PRA. So if you remember, they are the authority that manages and regulates banks, building societies, and insurers across the UK. So this is Jonathan. He is a current grad as well. His term manages and implements changes to the PRA systems that handle regulatory data received from regulated banks. He's also working on a project to replace the PRA rulebook, and this is the rule book that all of these firms must comply with. And he is on the data stream for the graduate program, so his role has a focus on data. And next we have Eden. So Eden actually did a placement at the bank as well. And this is a picture from her last day on placement. So she would highly recommend a placement to anyone. It made her work so much harder and she got back into good habits. She was in better habits when she went back to uni after working at the bank. So she currently works in the international banking division of the PRA. So she helps to supervise subsidiaries of multinational groups based abroad and working with overseas regulators and working specifically with large investment banks. So she said that the most interesting part of her role is getting to work with more senior people, despite being quite junior herself. Her team also looks at themes. So, for example, the effects of COVID, Brexit, and the recent US election. And she's also looking forward to hopefully traveling for her job once the pandemic ends. So how can you get into the bank? The bank has lots of different options to come in. So we have level 4 apprenticeships and level 6 apprenticeships, internships, industrial placements, and graduate programs. So the apprenticeships are probably what you would be looking at now if you want to join the bank. And these are some really great opportunities. I know that when I was in college, it wasn't really pushed to do an apprenticeship. And the only apprenticeships I knew of were more vocational. And I was a little bit more academic, so I wanted to do something more academic, but we have some great academic apprenticeships available, and the bank has a great one. So you might decide to do the level 4 apprenticeship, which you can join once you've finished A-levels. And we also have the level 6 degree apprenticeship, where you can study and also get a degree at the same time. So that's a really good one to have a look at. So I do highly encourage you to look at apprenticeships and see what is out there, because there are some great ones for you. And then we have internships and industrial placements. So this is what you'd be looking at if you were in uni and wanted some experience. And then we have the graduate development program, which is the program that I am on. So how can you learn more about the bank and get involved? If you go to our website, you can look at our knowledge bank, our educational resources, and look at some of our competitions. And you can also check out our Twitter to see what the bank is doing. So that is all from me. I'm going to pass you over to Steve and see what he has to tell you about the bank and his journey there.
Thank you, Simran. I'm just going to share my screen across. Share. And if I do that, can you see my slides and hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Excellent, yeah. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. My name's Steve Sprange. I'm a manager in one of the teams in the bank's technology department. And according to that picture, I appear to have briefly been the manager of the England football team as well. But for such a brief period that probably none of you remember that. Today, I'm going to run through a pretty similar presentation and list of topics to Simran, talk about how I ended up at the bank originally, sort of where I started from, where you guys are at the moment, my career path through the bank, some of the highlights that I've encountered, and I might finish with some top tips if I get time. So at A-level, I studied economics, maths, physics, and English. The two ones that have really kind of impacted my career the most were physics, which not only did I go on to do a degree in, but it taught me a lot about attention to detail and problem solving. It's been incredibly useful in a number of roles that I've had in the bank, but also my English language A-level as well really helped my communication, my written communication, my verbal communication, my ability to put down things on paper or express them verbally that have allowed me to persuade people to do things and explain things to people. And that's been a real present part of my career so far. At uni, I did astrophysics and astronomy, which involved a lot of doing that and looking at things like that. I'm conscious that both Simran and I did very traditionally academic degree subjects, and I'm going to come on a little bit later on with one of my top tips to kind of revisit this point. But I'd really say that you don't necessarily need these heavily academic subjects at uni or at A-level to come and work for the bank. Some of the most successful people I know in IT have got degrees in music, degrees in art, degrees in English, because there's an element of creativity in the way that those people can approach problems that sets them apart from perhaps your traditional IT person. So don't let your choice of degree, your choice of apprenticeship or subject or whatever exactly you're wanting to do put you off coming to work for the bank. I just wanted to make that clear with who's presenting today. My degree also involved a lot of that kind of stuff, which I didn't enjoy so much. My original plan, my kind of career plan, was to study a PhD and become a doctor and professor of physics in something along the lines of creating this kind of thing. This is computational modeling of planetary formation, which taught me loads about software development and coding. PhD fell through. I know I was never able to secure the funding to do what I wanted to do. So I ended up sort of in my last year in 2012 and early 2013 looking to apply to a range of graduate schemes. And the bank was one of the most attractive that I applied to, and definitely my favorite of the ones that I was successful on getting onto. Despite the fact that, on day one, interview one, I turned up in London. I didn't live in London, but I had a confidence. I brought a confidence with me that not only did I want the grad scheme, but I was a good fit for it. I was well prepared for the interview. I had to give a presentation. I knew that I'd practiced that presentation. I knew that I was going to do well. I really came in confident, and I walked into the door there. And I asked the security guard where I needed to go for the grad scheme. Now, for those of you who were paying attention to Simran's presentation earlier, you might know that that is not the bank. And actually the bank's there, and the building I'd walked into is essentially a shopping centre. Despite that small knock to the ego, I was clearly successful in passing the recruitment round, but it did sort of bring me down to earth a little bit on that first day. In terms of the way the graduate scheme worked when I joined, similar to Simran, really, it was all rotational at that point. So during that first year, I was lucky enough to work in 4 different teams. I started off in the team that was deploying Windows 7 for the first time, and deploying laptop devices to colleagues for the first time. So previously, most people in the bank had worked from a desktop PC at their desk in the office. They couldn't take it home. They couldn't work from home. They couldn't work flexibly. They couldn't go to the coffee shop or the library or wherever else they were stuck to their desk. And we changed all that. And that was a really nice introduction as to how good IT work can help people not only do their jobs more effectively, but can allow them to work from home and spend more time with their family, can allow them to work on the commute, and therefore, have less hours where they're outside the house and spend more time at home. And it hit home the good that I could do beyond simply making stuff work when it was broken. My second rotation was in database services team, so learning what a database is, using database languages and queries to be able to store large amounts of information. Quite an interesting rotation. I was able to spend almost 3 months building my own version of Football Manager in SQL and Excel. Perhaps not what I should have been spending my time on, but it was certainly educational. My third rotation was as a software developer. I'd done software development in my degree, as I'd mentioned previously, but this was a step up. This was software development for the masses. It was how you do it professionally using expensive tools and software. I learned loads there, and it was really, really interesting. I really enjoyed that. My final rotation was probably the most impactful. So I was tasked with looking at the bank's analytics tools. Now, the bank does a lot of analytics, right? A lot of our output, the sort of product that we produce, is good analysis, it's good policy, it's making decisions about the economy. Making those decisions and getting them correct involves crunching an awful lot of data. When I joined the bank, the big problem we had was that we had a whole bunch of these tools. So, Excel, I'm sure you'll have heard of. Power BI, you might have heard of, but there was a load of other ones as well. Over 150 of these analytical tools. And that was complicated to manage. It was expensive, and a lot of these things overlapped. So for any of you that are familiar with just 2 on the screen at the moment, Tableau and Power BI essentially do the same thing. They're just different tools from different vendors. My job was to look at the entire analytical tool estate and work out which ones were the best, which ones did the same job, and maybe we could get rid of 4 and keep 1. And in those 3 months, I saved the bank over £250,000 of licensing and kind of money that we're spending on software. But the core list of software that I decided that we should use going forwards I was able, and I had the opportunity to present that to a number of our deputy governors, who were some of our most senior staff, explain my work, explain my thinking, and get them to buy into that. But it's actually still now, almost 8 years later, the list that our analytical areas actually use to decide on their software. So it was amazing for me to have that level of impact on, an organization of 6,500 people when I'd been in the bank less than a year. Once that first year was up, I went into my first permanent role, which was as a SharePoint developer. And my main job was looking after the Bank of England's public facing website. So if you Google us, this is the website that you see. And I did a variety of tasks to do with this website, but the main one was implementing something called a CDN, or a content distribution network. So to kind of cover in a bit more detail something that Simran briefly mentioned, the bank, one of the things the bank does for the UK is set interest rates. And we set something called the Bank of England base rate. And that interest rate is the rate at which other banks can borrow money from us. Now that impacts you and it impacts everyone in the country, because if we make it more expensive for banks to borrow from us, they make it more expensive for you to borrow from them. So if you've got a credit card, if your parents have got a mortgage, hey, if you're lucky enough to have it, or maybe you're lucky enough to have a mortgage yourself already, the interest rate that you pay is directly linked to the Bank of England base rate. And we make a decision based on how the economy is performing every few months as to whether to change that rate, to increase it or decrease it. And this is an incredibly important process involving some of the most senior people in the bank. And the part that I got involved is when we announced that decision. Now, in the past, traditionally before COVID, one of those ways was to get a whole bunch of journalists, the economics editors that you might recognize from Sky News, BBC News, ITV News, and we'd lock them in the vault where they didn't have any phone signal and didn't have any internet. And we would explain in detail the decision. And then at midday, we let them out the vault and they can phone the news desk, they can go on radio, they can go on telly, and they can explain what the decision is and the detail behind the decision. We also make the announcement on Twitter. We also do it on the Bank of England website. The main issue we face with the website is that everyone knows when we're going to make that announcement. And that means that time around that announcement is one of the times that we get the most cyber attacks against our website, particularly denial of service attacks, which essentially just bring the entire website down. And we can't risk that. Having our website come down at that really essential time 3 or 4 times a year would be very, very bad for the bank's reputation. So I helped put in what's called a content distribution network, which basically is a set of servers around the world. And instead of connecting, when you access our website, instead of connecting directly to our website, you connect to one of these servers. And if you DDoS, if you do a cyber attack against one of these servers and bring that server down, all the other servers are still up. And if you then try and access our website again, you just go to another one of these servers. And there are too many of them and they're too resilient for you to be able to attack all of them at once. So putting that in place, I learned a load of skills and a load of knowledge, including around kind of cyber threats, how we manage them, how we mitigate them. That was an incredibly interesting role. After that, I then moved into my first management role. Now, this actually wasn't a people management role. I didn't have people reporting to me. It was what's called a technical management role, where I was in charge of thinking of strategies and thinking of plans to improve the technology that my team owned. It involved a lot of persuading people, delivering things through others. It also gave me my first exposure to vendor management, to working with external suppliers, agreeing contracts, kind of agreeing fees to play, handling budgets and that kind of thing, which has been incredibly useful. And it was also my first exposure to recruitment. So I've been lucky enough to manage a couple of teams now. And in each of those teams, I've had the opportunity to recruit new people, bring new talent into the team and kind of form the team in my image. And getting early exposure to helping other people interview, helping the stage after the interviews where you actually select people and you choose the correct candidate has been incredibly useful for me. Because I've been able to sort of learn how to interview, learn how to test people, learn how to kind of work out what makes people tick, whether they'd be a good fit for the team. And that's helped me going sort of onwards in my career. This role was kind of the first time in the bank where I felt that I was really enjoying my role, because being able to deliver things through others, deliver good work and improvements and fixing things, but via others, allowed me to have much greater, more positive impact than I ever could as an individual. And I found that really, really exciting and empowering. From there, I moved on to my first people management role. They were relatively junior staff. They did roles that I understood well. There were 4 of them initially. The role was mainly around kind of IT support with a little bit of analytics and training thrown in. During that time, I took 6 months off on shared parental leave. So the bank has an incredible parental leave package where essentially I took 6 months off work at full pay to partially help my wife with the parenting, but then my wife went back to work and I became the kind of the main parent who was at home every day with my daughter Elizabeth. That was an amazing opportunity, but I've got a bond with my daughter and a closeness with my daughter that I just wouldn't have if I'd spent that time with them. So a top tip from me was, if you, like me, are clear from a very early period that you would like to start a family, make sure when you're looking at employers that you're checking their parental leave policy. Make sure that that is something they're willing to support you in. Make sure that is something they will facilitate you being able to do, because if it is and you get to that point, it is so incredibly valuable. And obviously parenting is one of the things that's more important than work, so it's worth spending the time to treat it as that priority. Also during that role, I received a Governor's Award for promoting Microsoft OneNote in the bank. The bank was traditionally a very paper-based organization with lots of printing, lots of paper notebooks, lots of writing things by hand, which has a number of risks associated with it, from the cost of the paper to the security risk of information being left on the train and not being encrypted as it would be on a laptop. In the first year, we saved the bank over £250,000 worth of paper in terms of the printing that people were doing, and we saw a move from about 2% to about 3/4 of the bank using OneNote in the first 2 years, which was an amazing result. From then, I moved on. This is a piece of analytics we put together showing the collaboration that OneNote facilitated between the different areas of the bank. Every one of these tiny little lines is a link between 2 people in different areas of the bank, linked by a shared notebook. That collaboration wasn't there before. So this was produced after 2 years of OneNote sort of being promoted. This is all efficient collaboration, sharing of information, sharing of documentation that would have to have been done either by hand, in person, or by email before. So it was a really nice visualization of sort of the positive impact that we had on the bank. After that, I moved into my current role, so just over a year ago. I'm now managing a larger team, but most importantly, far more experienced technical experts. People who, unlike in my previous role, I could never do the job that these guys do. It would take me years and years of training and learning and on-the-job experience to do that job. So adapting and learning how to manage those people has been an interesting challenge over the last year, but has helped me grow. So my long-term career plan is to be a senior leader and to take on more and more people beneath me who I could not do their jobs, and who I need to trust their judgment and trust their ability to do their jobs without me necessarily being able to focus in on too much detail. And this role has been an incredible learning curve for that. We're also in charge of some really cool stuff. So my team selects the hardware, the laptops, the phones that we use, and we've got a budget of over £2 million a year to do that. We're looking at a lot of cloud technology. Microsoft Intune in particular is something that we're really interested in at the moment. And we're one of the first lines of cyber defense for the bank. So my team particularly are in charge of securing the laptop, securing our mobile phones, and deploying patches and fixes and sort of defenses against cyber threats that we know are coming. One of the biggest highlights for me in this role in the last year has been supporting colleagues working from home. So there was a number of areas in the bank who, because of the secure software that they were using, they weren't able to use laptops. They had to use secure desktops that couldn't be removed from the office because of what they were accessing via them was so important and so vital to the bank. When COVID came, the vast majority of colleagues from the bank were able to work from home. And personally, I've been working from home for more than a year now. Those colleagues, about 200 of them, were still travelling into central London using the tube, using public transport, putting their health at risk to do what the bank needed them to do. And my team were the ones who were responsible for allowing them to have secure access from their laptops at home without risking people being able to access that stuff that shouldn't have been able to. Now, this is a highlight for me because in IT you get to do a lot of good. You get to help a lot of people be effective at their roles, and you get to do some really interesting things, from some quite creative work to some really nice problem solving. There's something there for everyone. What I don't get often, and what a lot of people don't get often, is to come home at the end of the day, or step out the office into my lounge at the end of the day, I guess, and say, work I did today saved someone's life or stopped them putting their health at risk. So that was a very exciting opportunity over the last year. Finally, I know I've overrun the time a little bit, but these are some of my top tips, and I think these presentations are going to be shared with you, so I'll let you read these in your own time, but I'll just focus that again on that first one around, you don't need to do astrophysics at uni, you don't need to do human biology or human genetics at uni. You can go and do the thing that you're passionate about, because the important things are that you, by doing something that you're passionate about and that you enjoy, you will excel at it. And learning those skills along the way, maybe from an internship like Simran wants to do more and did a little bit of, maybe like me, it's without the internship, but just by just by doing well at uni, you learn the skills like good communication and attention to detail and the ability to work with others, to communicate with others. These things are vital for you joining the workplace and having a successful career, and no single degree is going to teach you all of that. So don't focus on trying to find something that does. I think I'll stop there if that's all right, and shall I hand over to our hosts to handle questions?